Hi, my name is Arturo Francisco Munoz, and I have a story to tell you. It begins with Costa Rica, a nation renowned today for its domestic tranquility, an economy strong in ecotourism, a fertile land with frequent rainfall that yields exceptional crops such as world-class coffee, and for a growing electronics export sector that promises a bright future. But the Costa Rica of my father's childhood was anything but this. Coming out of the Great Depression, my father lived times of great social unrest and poverty. My grandmother was a young widow, and my dad never met his own father. To care for her children, she set up a small coffee shop in the parlor of her little house, where she would collect nickels and dimes from busy passerbys. Costa Rica prior to the 1940s had been intimately linked commercially and culturally to Europe, particularly to Spain and France, and the majority of the professional and ruling class received its education in medicine, engineering, chemistry, and law from universities in Belgium, France, England, and Germany. But in the turbulent years leading to World War II, the working class in Costa Rica found leaders in a new generation of young and wealthy idealists, as well as social organizers in their own ranks, who sought for reform and control of the government by the masses. So my dad lived his childhood at a confusing time when not only the world's economy gasped for air, but the fabric of his own country was straining under the weight of fear. Fear of a fascist takeover, fear of a communist takeover, fear of a civil war, which finally did come in 1948, when he was not even 20 years old. By contrast, several decades later, he raised me in an economically prosperous and peaceful Costa Rica. But he seldom spoke of his childhood experiences, except to share how tremendously hard he had worked in his youth as the eldest son of a widowed mother to help support her and my aunts with the help of his younger brother Alexis. When I was only 12 and done with my grammar school, my father brought us for a 3-month-long vacation to the United States for the first time in my life. It was a luxurious affair in those days to travel abroad, and travel we did. My older sister Giselle had already spent over a year studying in California. My mom had spent a summer on a road trip from Cleveland to San Francisco sightseeing, and now it was the rest of the family's turn. New Orleans, LA, Miami. That 3-month-long vacation began a travel adventure for us that did not end for 2 years. I never met my grandmother because she died before I was born, but I am certain that she would have been pleased with my father's success. How could a man raised in poverty in a developing country at a time of such uncertainty emerge so splendidly? It all goes back to that fateful day when my father first worked for wages. The way he tells the story, he was only 13, and just like me 30 years later, he was done with grammar school. Like me, his parent had a vision for his future. In his case, however, it was not higher education. His mother secured for him an entry job at a workshop to apprentice him there eventually to the owner, a cabinet maker. And for a week my dad worked like all the other grown men at the shop. Like a slave, he said, only to receive $2.80 in today's money. That was a 7 cents an hour wage, a pittance even for a third world country. My father couldn't bear it. Young as he was, he still realized this was unjust. He rushed home where my grandmother asked him for his contribution to the family till. He handed the money and exclaimed, "This can't be. Is this what I'll be worth every week? I can't take this exploitation another week, Mother, much less for years. I can't go back there." But my grandmother would not hear of it. The family needed the money, scant as it were. "If I come up with an alternative, will you consider it?" he asked her. "I will. But if it's not sensible, you're going back to the shop first thing Monday morning," she answered. "Now go play outside." But my father couldn't play. While the other kids in the neighborhood were out kicking ball, he sat by the curb to ponder an escape. Don't you feel sometimes like this, perhaps every Sunday night, when the thought arrives, "Oh God, tomorrow is Monday again, back to that dreaded job I hate and slave over week after week"? Or maybe you're saying, "I'd rather have that dreaded job that I no longer have, rather than face another Monday with nothing to do except wonder what else to do to get some money into this house." Either way, that's where my father was emotionally at 13, without a father of his own, mired in poverty, by the side of the street, weighed down by the new responsibility of caring for a family even at that young age, and with no prospects for a better future. And what he did next was nothing short of genius, and I've told you already how much it changed his life and impacted my own. And it can do the same for you. But you must now listen very carefully. I've shared this with you, a very intimate part of me, because I believe that if you're in need similar to how my father was, and believe me, I've been there myself many times before, then it would be wrong of me not to partake of the same remedy that has always helped me overcome my difficulties with generating income or finding work, which is a solution that I learned from my father. But the crucial point here is that my father took action, and you must never forget that. This is not a story that I've told you just to entertain you. This is a lesson that you must go out and put to practice, yes, even as soon as today. For you see, my dad didn't wait. When the stroke of genius touched him, he bolted out of the street and ran to his mother, where the opportunity was to be made. "Mom," he said, "how many cupcakes can you make me with the money that I gave you today?" She gave him a side glance and said, "Son, why would I charge you for cupcakes? If you want one, go ahead and take one if you're hungry." "No, Mom," he answered, "it's not for me. I just want to know if you would permit me to sell your cupcakes. I've been thinking, if you make me some cakes, I'll put them in a cardboard box, I'll take a nickel and pay the bus fare to the capital and sell them there. And if I can sell enough of them, maybe I don't have to return to the workshop on Monday." "I don't know, Frank," she said. "The capital is awful far. It might be unsafe." "Please, Mama," he pleaded. "It's the only chance I got. And it's not unreasonable, is it? Can you take the money and use it to make cupcakes for me to sell? I'll be careful." My grandmother thought for a moment, and without a word nodded her approval and turned to the kitchen. Meanwhile, my father prepared his strategy to deliver the cakes. There was much to think about. Where would he sell them? Who would he sell them to? What would he tell them to persuade them to buy from him? How much would he charge per cake? By the time my grandmother was done, my dad had his box ready and several ideas to test. He was terribly nervous, an emotional wreck, in fact. But the thought of not returning to that grueling work at the shop reigned in his fears and encouraged him to move forward. That day, my dad made 2 trips to the capital city. The first one sold out his entire load of merchandise and gave him a reason to return for that afternoon's coffee break rush. But that second trip, which also sold out and made him more in one day of jostling than he had earned in 1 week of back-breaking labor, gave him reason never to become a wage slave again. Ever since then, my father has said to me repeatedly, I've worked for nobody except for my own customers. And indeed, my dad never had a boss to tell him what to do, or a weekly paycheck to depend upon, because he was the one giving out the paychecks. That I remember vividly from childhood. His company was well known in the city where he lived. It produced the highest quality French and German breads and pastries, which he learned to produce by building relations with immigrant bakers from those countries. My father was a true entrepreneur, focused, innovative, hardworking, and he did it all with only a 6th grade education. Later, he took some night courses and finished high school well into his 20s, and that is as far as he got academically. But when he finally retired several years ago, he had built a multi-million-dollar treasure trove to live off of, having started from a mere $2.80 a week. And you can do the same. Because this story repeats itself in the lives of many focused, innovative, hard-working entrepreneurs willing to give themselves a chance to live outside the box. The secret to my father's success was that he took action. My dad never procrastinated. He didn't create excuses to avoid taking action where actions were necessary. It is true, he was desperate. But so can you become desperate for something better than what you have today. Desperation comes naturally once hope dies. So if you're hoping for a better job, for more money, for a chance to use your talents or your education, even if you're hoping to become your own boss someday, stop doing that. Kill that hope and instead become desperate for an actual purpose in your life. Then take action.